Let's get into a spoiler-free movie review now. Finally get to talk about Evil Dead Rise. I love me a good horror movie, and I feel like Evil Dead is just one of the most underappreciated franchises in the entire genre. Now, at this point in my movie watching career, it is really hard for me to feel fear when watching a movie. I'm pretty desensitized. Blood, guts, demons don't really get under my skin, but just watching this trailer alone, it got me scared. And going into this movie, I felt a little bit worried, oddly for me, that I wasn't going to be able to handle it because there are so many disturbing images in the trailer alone. I could only imagine what they were going to put into the actual movie. So I probably hold this movie to a bit of a different standard. So before we get into this full movie review, here's just a little bit of that trailer if you missed it. And just so you know, pretty scary movie, pretty scary trailer. So if you're not into it, well, buckle up because we're getting deep into this movie.
I now commence reading aloud the Book of the Dead.
Mom?
Open up now. We can be a big, happy family again.
You don't look so good, Mom.
So I will say it at the top of this review, Evil Dead Rise is one of the best horror movies in years, but it's not perfect. This movie is better than Megan, it's better than Smile, but just based on what I've said so far, I feel like this movie is harder to sell to the general public. Even for me, going into this movie, having that nervous feeling and thinking that it was going to give me nightmares afterwards, it's hard to convince somebody to want to go watch a movie like this with you. Hey, you want to go watch a movie about demons and you may have nightmares after watching this movie? No, I really don't. But I feel like that is the essence of the Evil Dead franchise back what Sam Raimi created with the original one. Yes, the Sam Raimi who did the original Spider-Man trilogy and Doctor Strange Into the Multiverse of Madness. And I feel like this franchise has built a fan base on being, very campy, over the top, extremely gory, basically taking every horror element up to a 10. So Evil Dead Rise did not disappoint on that front. What the movie is about, it's a reunion between two estranged sisters. One comes home after being on the road as the guitar tech with the band. She goes to see them for the first time in years. It's her sister and her 3 kids, and they live in this really creepy old apartment complex that's about to be condemned. And little do they know, a demonic presence is hiding underneath this apartment building that comes out in the form of this big earthquake. It shakes up a bunch of things, and then the kids go down into this hole created by the earthquake and find the Book of the Dead. And if you've seen any other Evil Dead movie, or if you haven't, that's where everything comes from. That's where all the evil demons come out of. As soon as you open up that book, it unleashes havoc, and it really doesn't let up until, well, basically it takes everybody out. Will these characters have a better time defeating this evil presence? Well, to figure that out, you have to watch the movie. But what I loved that this movie did is right out of the gate, it hits you with that punch right in the face. I love it when horror movies have a killer opening and waste no time with a lot of backstory, and that's exactly what this movie did. It really quickly established the tone with this kind of vicious cinematography through the use of a drone. It gave this really jarring opening that combined with the theme song really just made it feel like an Evil Dead movie. So you get that opening sequence and then it leads us to our story. So you get that punch at the beginning with the opening scene and then you get right into the story. Now, I always feel that horror movies lose me a little bit in those first 20 minutes as they're trying to establish all their characters, but what director and writer Lee Cronin was able to do was actually create some characters I cared about. I was actually interested in the sisters' relationship, the 3 kids in the movie. So as it's fleshing them out, as it's going through the reason they are living here, going through all the issues with the kid's dad, their entire relationship, I really start to care about them and bond with them, even though it's pretty quick. Most times I just don't even care. I'm just like, hey, get to the horror stuff, bring out the demons, show me some blood and guts because that's what we all came here for. But I think there is power of creating characters you actually feel for in a horror movie, because then once all the crazy stuff happens and you know some of these characters aren't going to make it to the very end of the movie, it gives a little bit more impact there. So that was a way I felt that not only did this movie set itself apart from others in this franchise, but really from any other horror movie. Also, what I loved about this movie was the strong female presence throughout this entire thing. A lot of times in horror movies, it's that overused damsel in distress, and the female characters are always needing rescuing, always needing help, or always being taken out by the villain. In this case, they are the ones being awesome. They are the ones taking on this demon. They are the ones who make this movie fun to watch. The main conflict they face is after they open the Book of the Dead. This demon possesses the mom, and she is no longer herself. Makes this really creepy speech saying she's going to kill everybody in her family, and then they just try to keep her out of the apartment as they find a way to escape from the building. I also really enjoyed that it has a pretty limited cast. You have the family, and then you have a few of the people living in the apartment. So that really is able to create this little horror fairy tale. And since they didn't spend a whole lot of money on having other actors, a lot of that money I felt went to the VFX, all the blood. And it did create one of my favorite movie theater experiences when watching a horror movie. Something that collectively the entire movie theater did. There was this moment where one of the characters was doing something that was like, why are you doing this? That always happens in a good horror movie. It's a little bit cliche at times of nobody in their right mind would do this, go towards the danger, but they did. And there was a collective, don't do it moment in my theater. And that just felt like this fun little bonding moment. That is the reason I love going to the movies. I think horror movies especially bring that out in people of just going, enjoying a movie with strangers and yelling at the screen. Visually, I don't think there was anything groundbreaking in this movie. I would have to say what really shined was the sound design. You heard it a little bit in the trailer I played earlier, but all the weird little buzzing sounds, all the little distorted voices, a lot of the panning left and right in the theater, I felt that in my chest throughout this entire movie. And I actually think that is what made this movie scarier to watch. It was all the things going on in your ears, more so than the images for me. And I was really expecting to be a little bit more scared by this movie. Maybe I overhyped myself a little bit too much, but I felt like all of the action and all of the horror was just a little bit more shocking and gory aside from being scary. I think there's a difference there. It's easier to throw a lot of blood on the screen, and there is a lot of blood used in this movie. I believe it was 1,700 gallons used in this entire movie, which is the equivalent of about 13,000 blood donations. And I really love seeing the return of blood, which is something I feel that the genre has gotten away from. It was just kind of nice to see that level of blood again. So I enjoyed that element of it. But I think when it comes to the demon and possession type movie, I've been more scared in other movies. So maybe I was just a little bit more prepared, but I just felt it was a little bit more shocking, brutal, and bloody than it was just all out scary. The movie kind of got stuck in second gear, where it started out with a bang with that opening sequence. I started caring about my characters, but I kept waiting for it to ramp up a little bit more and more. And then until I got to the third act, I realized, oh, it really wasn't going to get to that level for me that I was expecting it to go on. But it was a really solid third act, and that is what I love in a horror movie. The big final battle, and that is where really all the blood is showcased in this movie. I don't want to ruin it, but if you've seen The Shining, you know there's an elevator scene with a lot of blood. That was really fun to see on screen. The entire time I was just thinking, I wonder how long these actors were colored red, because that is kind of a trademark of the Evil Dead movies, to have your character completely drenched in blood. Their entire body, face, everything is red. The only color you see is the white of their eyes and the white of their teeth. I think that is such a great still and look of the movie. So all in all, it delivered on that front. I will say when it comes to the entire series and where it stacks up, nothing can touch the original Evil Dead. It is one of my favorite movies from the 80s, but it made me appreciate a little bit more the 2013 version, which I feel like, it came out 10 years ago now, that we don't revisit enough as horror movie fans and don't give that movie enough credit for reviving this franchise. So the movie is a certified hit, making $90 million at the box office at the time of recording this. So it's safe to say there will be another installment. Hopefully Lee Cronin will be back writing and directing this movie. I think he's on the right track. Really nailed the action in this movie, really nailed the blood and the horror elements, but just make a better second act and keep that energy up through the entire movie. The next one could be the best one yet. So I am all in still on the Evil Dead franchise. For the Evil Dead Rise, I give it 4 out of 5 elevators full of blood.